The food systems of the future. Lena Horvath, Head of Sustainability, Gullspång Refood. Olav Kjørven, CEO, EAT. Alex Bakir, General Partner, Norrsken Accelerator. Per Olsson, Deputy Science Director, Stockholm Resilience Centre. Moderated by Gustaf Brandberg, Founding Partner, Gullspång Invest.
Good morning. So I'm Gustaf. I run Gullspång, the family office, with my two brothers, and we decided to use the money we don't need for ourselves to help entrepreneurs solve global problems. And I'm going to warm up a little bit with a question. So in the audience, please raise your hand if you sometimes eat food. Yes. So we all do. 8 billion of us, soon 10. And it plays such a crucial role in our lives, not only for nutrition, for pleasure, but also for bonding and in social contexts. And it's really the best of times when it comes to food. Never before in history has good food been so abundant. But it's also the worst of time. Never before has the food system been so destructive. So we need a food system transformation. That's what we're going to talk about today. And we have the best possible panel to do that. So please introduce yourself. Yeah, Per has already been on stage, but say some words on.
Yeah, so Per Olsson then, Deputy Science Director of the Stockholm Resilience Centre, and I can just say that my main focus for the thing I spend most time on is understanding transformative change to a more just and sustainable world.
Yep. Yeah. And Alex?
Hey, I'm Alex Bakir, General Partner for Norrsken Accelerator. We invest in 20 companies per year, tackling some of the world's greatest challenges. We define that as UN SDGs, so food and food systems are a small part of that. And if you are here tomorrow, you'll see this year's batch pitching, so please be here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Olav Kjørven. I'm the CEO of the EAT Foundation, or just EAT. We're based in Oslo, Norway. I'm Norwegian myself, so norsk, so I feel very at home here at Norrsken. And EAT is really also about driving the transformations that are needed in our food systems, and very much based on the best available science. So, working with Per and the Stockholm Resilience Centre and many other partners, we try to generate the best, most authoritative science as a basis for action.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lena Horvath. I'm an investment manager and head of sustainability at Gullspång Refood. I work out of Refood's San Francisco office, so I am American, although some Swedish background. And Refood, which Gustaf could introduce probably better than I could, but we invest in category-defining companies that are transforming our food system to make it more sustainable and equitable for all.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a great lineup. I'm going to start with a question to you, Olav, because Gunhild Stordalen founded EAT already in 2016, and you have really been a pioneer when it comes to put sustainable food on the global map and a huge inspiration for Refood. So can you tell us a little bit about why Gunhild chose food as the focus?
Yeah, I've been wondering about that myself, Gustaf, because Gunhild is a terrible cook. And she's not even that interested in food in terms of, the eating thing. But she was always an environmentalist and a campaigner from when she was a child. She cared deeply about the nature, biodiversity, climate issues, but decided for whatever reasons to pursue a medical career, and she is a medical doctor. And when she found herself on the board of the Nordic Choice hotel chain, she decided, okay, I'm going to contribute to making this chain's operations as sustainable as possible. Then she quickly realized that by far the biggest footprint in negative terms is a food. It's not the towels, right? It's a food. And she said, okay, let's fix this. Let's figure out what's both healthy, remember she's a doctor, and sustainable. And that's when she realized there were no such guidance out there, not for hotels, not for anything. which led her to convene the first Eat Stockholm Food Forum back in 2014, I think it was. And that triggered so much interest and so much response that it led to the setting up of EAT as an organization.
Okay, yeah, I have a similar experience because I have a background in tech, but then I participated in a program at the Stockholm Resilience Centre in 2014 and discovered the importance and how big the food system is and in need of change. So at Stockholm Resilience Centre, food is one of your many areas you look at, and you talk about transformations, not only solutions. So can you elaborate a little bit on your thinking there?
Yeah. A lot of people talk about transformation, and there's a sort of increased call for transformative change. So I think it's important to know what we're talking about. And when we talk about transformation, we mean a specific type of change that is different from, for example, other types of change like adaptation. So, and transformation is about changing the systems that created the problems in the first place. So it's based on systems thinking. It embraces complexity, and it often involves fundamental change in behavior and practices, in rules and regulations, but also in values and worldviews, like deeper in our societies, right? Sometimes that iceberg analogy is used to understand the depths of things, right? So and it includes also change in resource flows, power dynamics, and sometimes I summarize sort of what we mean by talking about a fundamental change in a number of relationships. So the relationship to ourselves and the inner work that we have to do, the relationship to each other, including past and future generations, but also our relationship to the planet. So we need to see, so when we talk about transformation, we mean we address these kind of relationships.
Interesting. And we are built on this thinking a little bit in our investment approach. Could you kind of guide the audience a little bit on that, Lena, how we think?
Absolutely. So our theory of transformation really rests on two key tenets. The first is that the global economy has to become more sustainable and therefore will become more sustainable. It's an imperative, and we don't really want to consider an alternative to that. And the second tenet is that the food system today is one of the largest contributors to the negative sides of our global economy and the negative impacts on sustainability. But it has the potential to not only address those issues, but actually become climate positive and socially positive. And so that creates a huge opportunity to invest in innovations acting at leverage points in the food system that can help it transform and become more sustainable. So building on the work of our excellent co-panelists here, we took the planetary boundaries and we adapted them, or we used EAT's version of them adapted to the food system to define our sort of end goal, where we want the food system to be, is operating within those planetary boundaries. And then we applied the concepts of transformative investing and transformational change to identify leverage points in the system where companies, innovators can produce new technologies, new business models, new products that have the potential to address not just the symptoms of our current food system, but really get at the problems and the root causes of why those symptoms are occurring, to transition the system to something that is more sustainable and meets the needs of our planet and everybody on it.
So can you mention an example on how we think or how we've invested?
So one key example I would say is a company called Agrina. So we invested in a company that's trying to transform agriculture. Our soil is an incredible resource that we are destroying every single day. This is something I'm very passionate about, so I could talk about it endlessly. But helping farmers transition to sustainable practices, leveraging financial systems and the emerging carbon markets. We see that as a brand new tool that can be leveraged in a way that can help transition an entire set of operators and therefore an entire system toward sustainability.
Thank you. So moving on to Alex, and you invest in really early stages, really early. So how do you think systems think? How important is it for you when you invest?
So let's start with systems is super important, right? I think we have to understand roughly what's going on what the goals are. But it's challenging with early stage investments. Once you really get into mapping out that system in great levels of detail, you can kind of create a bit of a box around what you want to do. And that might be good, but you also might be missing stuff that's transformative outside that box. So I think it's super important to know about systems, but I think it gets increasingly challenging when you look at like a global landscape of pre-seed startups coming up with independent ideas. Like, what if they had a concept that was slightly outside of your very detailed view of the system? So that's kind of the only caution I have, and I hope that lands well with the panel, because I know there's a lot of systems thinkers here, and Norrsken itself thinks in that way. But there's some risks there that we should consider.
No, and I think that's a good point. And if you think about the system, it doesn't really exist as a model in our imagination. So the reality is there, and the system thinking is trying to create a model of reality, and therefore is excluding things. And sometimes we might exclude really important things. So like at ReFood, we think of all the work that we do is to create a starting point for discussion when we meet an entrepreneur. And then we go backwards again. So we can meet entrepreneurs that don't really fit our investment thesis, but they are interesting in some way. And then we learn from them, and then we realize there were things about the reality we didn't know about when we did our desk job at home. So I think it's important not to get stuck in your mental models. And the second thing is that you can never really predict the consequences of what happens. Like the theory of change is a theory, and then it never plays out exactly as you planned. So, but I want to touch on another topic correlated to this, because sometimes we meet companies with really high ideas, like big ideas on how they're going to create positive impact. And then Per, you sometimes says that sometimes when you want to set out to change the system, it's quite likely that you are changed by the system. Or as Tyson said, like everyone has a plan until you get a punch in the face. So when you hit reality, maybe you have to pivot. And we've seen startups pivot away from the impact just because they need to get profitable, because otherwise they die. So what's your thinking on that? After you invested, you want to create impact, and then...
Yeah, it's a reality that these companies face. We're looking for that unique intersection where impact will scale as the company scales commercially. Their business model is inherently tied to creating positive impact. But sometimes those companies come up against the realities of the current system, right? Even though they're trying to transform the system, they still have to operate in the system they're in today. And that system isn't always conducive to scaling that impact. I think, we've experienced it in our portfolio. I won't name names, obviously, but when that happens, what we look for is the entrepreneur, is the leader, is the person who came in and brought us that novel, impactful innovation, committed to that still, and is there a path forward for them, maybe not immediately, but post this next phase of their company's life, where they could have that impact. But I really think it comes back to our due diligence process, because like I said, we're looking for that intersection, and that's on us as an investor to be really diligent about understanding the market, understanding the opportunity, and understanding how that might influence an investor or an innovator and an entrepreneur in their ability to execute on the theory of change that we develop with them. And so do they have the right structures in place internally? Do they have the right mindset, the right approach, and the right product and the right product market fit to take that forward? Or is that innovation better suited to a different type of capital or a different model that isn't reliant on these capitalistic markets that we are operating in?
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I think maybe two additional points. One very human, it's really the founders of the company and their desires that are going to drive a lot of outcomes, right? So if a founder really, really cares about that problem, they're probably going to choose to shut down. So we spend a lot of time looking at the teams. Are they passionate about this? Is there a real connection to what they want to solve? So that's kind of the human piece. And then if it does happen, like, I don't like getting punched in the face. I think I would probably pivot if that happened to me. But if it does happen, there are things you can do, right? So you could always give the equity back to the company. I've never met a founder yet that is not going to take 10 of their company back for cents on the dollar. So you can always choose to exit if you get into that uncomfortable situation. Fortunately, we haven't faced it yet, but it doesn't mean that we won't.
Okay, and you touched about like different sources of capital, and Per mentioned that it's really important to bring people together. And what EAT Foundation does really well is to work with stakeholders across in many different stakeholders globally. So, and we work like with investments and startups. That's our ecosystem. That's our world. But you work much broader than that. Could you mention a little bit about the stakeholders you interact with, and how you work with them?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying, in the early days of EAT, hardly anyone was talking about food systems. It was basically a forest where no one saw the trees, or the opposite, actually. A lot of trees, no one saw the forest. We're coming from a world with a very entrenched mindset of working in silos. That's very true for governments. It's also true for actors really across the food system. And when I say food system, it's all the different value chains, right? That from production to consumption, and that influence, or that are active participants in this, or that influence it one way or another. And what we have tried to do is first to bring about that shift in mindset, that it is actually a complex system, whether we like it or not. The problem, I think, sometimes is that when that is understood, good ideas for taking action gets shot down because you're accused of not thinking about all the other pieces of the system, and that's very paralyzing sometimes. And that's the problem that sometimes we're faced with. So we try to be razor focused on identifying some of the most potentially potent levers of change that can have a meaningful influence on the future trajectory of the system. So, I mean, it goes without saying that policy is important. Governments, they set the rules of the game. It goes without saying that the big food companies are important actors, and we see a lot of market concentration, right? A few actors dominating different parts of the value chain. Obviously, these actors need to be influenced. There is the obvious enormous constituency of people as citizens, as voters, and as consumers. They have enormous power, but it's very hard to activate that enormous power that people as consumers and voters actually have. What are some of the levers then to influence this system? We believe that capital is definitely one. And so that's a reason why we have set up something called the Good Food Finance Network to try to accelerate the shift in mindsets that have happened in if you wish, large pockets of actors around food systems, but not yet in the world of finance, with notable exceptions, such as Gullspång and many of you in this room, I'm sure. But there's a big job to be done. If you look at energy, most people in finance get now that the future is clean and renewable. The question is, how quickly can you scale? But when it comes to food, we're very far away from a shift in mindsets. Another key constituency, we believe, will be the big cities around the world, because that's where all the food ends up. That's where demand is generated. And cities are a very interesting kind of missing link, so to speak, in the work to drive food systems change, because they're at the intersection of policy and people. And the interesting thing now is that a lot of the major cities around the world are actually pretty fired up and ready to go and play this role. And so it's really important to come in behind the cities, while, of course, also zooming in on the role that capital can and must play in driving change, and ultimately through that also enable the policy shifts that are desperately needed.
And you mentioned a couple of interesting things there, and one is like the hourglass shape of the food industry, where you have lots and lots of producers, then you have just a few companies in the middle. I think 12 companies control a majority of the retail sales, and then you have the retailers, and then you have lots of consumers. And the second one, like the regulations part in this, not only cities as buyers of food, but this industry is heavily regulated, and there are lots of subsidies.
Yeah.
Is there something, and I think it's really important for any company who wants to play in this industry to understand that this is not a typical industry that works like other industries. But on the other side, if you can get through this, the pot of gold on the other side is so huge, because this is such a huge market, trillions and trillions of dollars every year in market value. But how do you work with like this? Or is it efficiencies in the market, or how do you see that? Is that something you see any change in, or is that just something we need to?
I mean, it's a battle out there that's raging, right? And you see signs of hope or progress, for example, with the European Union Farm to Fork strategy, actually trying to shift the policy environment in favor of the transformations we need. But it's a dogfight happening right now around that strategy. It remains to be seen what will survive out of that strategy and be implemented in EU law. And that fight is going on as we speak. And then the next big fight is the common agricultural policy. And speaking of Europe now, we need to move the needle on policy, tough as it is, because it really does set the rules of the game. The subsidies is a key case in point. So is fiscal policy, taxes, marketing. There's a very interesting role that public procurement can and should play in shifting demand. And there is some interesting work happening now in a growing number of countries to move the needle in that direction. I think that is one of these very interesting levers of change. Actually, when we did a analysis of the Norwegian food system, kind of a mapping, what stood out as the lowest hanging fruit, as a kind of interesting lever of change, was procurement. And we're not just talking about public here. We're talking about food service too, right? I mean, the food that we eat in our cantinas at work every single day. It's becoming the most important meal of the day for more and more people, certainly here in the Nordics. And to tinker with that lever can be extremely powerful, and also create market opportunities for those who are producing the healthy, regeneratively produced food that we need more of, and through that expand market opportunities and investment opportunities, right, for those who want to be part of this transformation to realize it.
Yeah, and I think the key point here is that a lot of things are going on behind the scene in the corridors of the power and regulators, and it's really important to be in knowledge of that when you create your strategies, so that you can either take opportunity, like catch opportunities from programs like Food as Medicine program in the US, but also so you don't run into the wall, because you will be killed by the elephants. But Per, how do you think at Stockholm Resilience Centre about this concentration of power in certain industries? It could be a threat to like the incumbents preserving status quo, but I know you have this project CBOS that where you actually work with incumbents.
Yeah.
So like how do you think about this, or how do you work with?
Well, I think it's, as I mentioned before, these transformative alliances, I think is really important, and that we try to collaborate with maybe actors that we haven't collaborated with before. I'm a big fan of Adam Kahane's work on collaborating with your enemy, right? And that's a bit what we need to. That's the kind of thinking that we need to have. It's like who am I not working with, and why? And then because Adam writes about stretch collaboration, but which is a method that he has developed and Rio's partners, but also now he's also written a book about radical collaboration, which is more linked to dealing with climate change. So I think it's a key, this collaboration, and in also these collaborations then work with power distribution. So, you can do a bit of deliberation of power, for example, in those new collaborations.
Yes. So I think the market structure, it doesn't need to be a problem. It could be, you can see it as a problem, something you want to change, but it could also be a leverage that you use. And I know that in the CBOS project, you work with the big fishery companies.
Yeah.
And they realize that they need to become more sustainable, because otherwise they will run out of stock. There will be no fish in the oceans that they can fish.
Yeah.
So they will kill their own business. So, and as you said, like, collaborate with your enemies, but you can also think about enemies as just actors. And you don't have to, like, assign good or bad, like they're evil or they're good. They're just doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And many of them want to become sustainable. So another strategy for startups could actually be to help the big companies to solve their sustainability problems.
Yeah.
So that could be a huge opportunity, instead of like trying to point finger at them and say that they're evil and you want to fight them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I would like to move back to Alex and Lena. When you meet startups in the food space, or generally, but in the food space, so what's the main reason that you lose interest in them? Like, how your screening process and what you're looking for and what you're not looking for?
So we have about 2,500 applications kind of inbound per year, right? And that's across the UN SDGs. So there's like a cluster around food, agriculture, energy. Of that 2,500, probably about 400 are kind of food related. We saw a lot of packaging companies this year. That's like a super hot topic. Of that, we invested in only two this year, right? One, Hollow, which you should really meet, by the way. They're building a platform to make regenerative agriculture kind of more cost effective than normal agriculture. So super cool guys. And then Your Beats, right? It's another platform trying to take the social commerce playbook and connect it to food, right? A lot of us, look for stuff on social media and buy it. Why shouldn't food be there? So I bring up those two examples because scalability is actually the #1 reason they don't make it through the funnel. Right? We look for companies that can positively impact 1 billion lives. We call them impact unicorns. And scalability is just really challenging when you get into physical stuff, right? Delivering food into the canteens. All right, so we operate on like a 10-year life cycle. How big can they get in 10 years? And that's kind of the underpinnings of the VC model, for good or for bad. So scalability.
Yeah. We definitely pay attention to scalability as well, but I think our primary screen, our first screen, is really around transformative impact. So we've created sort of a way of breaking down the food system into investment themes that build on the work of the Eat Lancet Commission, identifying shifts that need to happen in our food system to transition it towards sustainability. We look for companies that fit within one of those themes, which are healthy soils, transitioning to regenerative and sustainable practices, sustainable proteins and fats, changing the way we think about where we get our protein and fat from, and not being as reliant on animal agriculture. We look at sustainable supply chains, so circularity and ways to make our supply chain less wasteful. And finally, healthy diets, how to improve the nutrient density and the access to nutrient-rich foods for everybody on the planet. So does it fit within one of those themes? And then, is it in one of our segments that we've identified as key leverage points in the system? But we don't just stop there, because beyond that, going back to what I said earlier, we look at alignment of sort of the transformative potential with the market reality. We think about what are the enabling factors, what are the potentially stifling factors that could keep this from scaling, and is it coming into the market at the right opportunity to give it the right tools, the right environment to scale? And can we be of service to that founder, to that company as an investor and help them accelerate that? Or is a different type of capital or a different investor better suited to that? So if we don't see that transformative potential and if we don't see that alignment with ReFood's capabilities and with the market realities, I think that's the most common reason we would pass on a company.
Thank you. This is a big topic. And now we have been scratching on the surface. There are so much things to talk about. We have a workshop tomorrow, 2-hour workshop, where we go deeper. If you're interested, please sign up. It's full, but if there are no shows, you can be on the waiting list, and we hope we can let you in. I just wanted to end on saying that, like, the food system is today creating a lot of destruction. But tipping points go both ways. We heard about these tipping points that melt the ice and create this climate crisis. But you can tip the system the other way around. And there's so much potential in the food system to sequestrate carbon in the soil, to improve people's health, and so on. So it's really an area worth exploring. And I encourage everyone thinking about starting a startup. So start your next startup in food and change the food system. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and thanks to the panel for a great discussion. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.